I asked a friend to feed my cat while I was out of town. She texted me, "Is your housekeeper supposed to be cleaning at night?" I said no. She only comes on Tuesday mornings. Then she sent a photo. Someone was standing in my living room window. I froze when I saw the face. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I've always believed that trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. At 63 years old, I've built my life on that principle. Trust in my neighbors, trust in my family, and especially trust in the few close friends I've cultivated over the decades. That belief shattered on a Tuesday evening in September, when a single text message turned my peaceful world into something I could barely recognize. I was in Portland, visiting my sister Margaret for what was supposed to be a relaxing long weekend. She'd been recovering from surgery, and I'd promised to help her around the house. My own home in Cascade Falls, a quiet town nestled in the foothills of Western Oregon, sat empty except for Whiskers, my elderly tabby cat who'd been my companion for 15 years. Before leaving, I'd asked my friend Julia to stop by each evening to feed Whiskers and make sure he had fresh water. Julia lived 3 blocks away, and we'd known each other since our children attended the same elementary school 30 years ago. If there was anyone I trusted implicitly, it was her. The text came at 8:47 in the evening, just as Margaret and I were settling down to watch a movie. "Scarlett, is your housekeeper supposed to be cleaning at night?" I stared at the screen, confused. My housekeeper, Rosa, came every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. She'd been doing so for the past 7 years, like clockwork. I typed back quickly, "No, she only comes Tuesday mornings. Why?" The 3 dots appeared, indicating Julia was typing. They seemed to pulse forever. Then my phone buzzed with an incoming photo. My blood turned to ice. The image showed my living room window from the outside, taken from my front yard. Through the gauzy curtains, backlit by the lamp I always left on when traveling, stood a figure, a person, standing perfectly still in the center of my living room, facing the window as if looking out, or perhaps aware they were being watched. My fingers trembled as I typed, "Get out of there, now!" I was already standing, my heart hammering against my ribs. Margaret looked up from her book, alarmed by my sudden movement. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer. I was dialing 911, my mind racing through impossible scenarios. A burglar? But nothing in my modest home was worth stealing. I had no expensive jewelry, no valuable electronics beyond a basic television. The most precious things I owned were family photographs and my late husband's watch, tucked safely in my bedroom drawer. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I explained the situation, gave my address in Cascade Falls, and stressed that my friend might be in danger. The woman's calm, professional voice did little to ease my panic. "Officers are being dispatched now, ma'am. Is your friend still on the property?" I looked at my phone. Julia had responded, "I'm in my car, driving away. Scarlett, I'm so scared. Who is that?" "She's safe," I told the dispatcher. "She left." "Good. Officers should arrive within 5 minutes. Do you have any idea who might be in your home?" Did I? I ran through the possibilities. Rosa had a key, but this made no sense. My son, Daniel, had a key, but he lived in Seattle and rarely visited. My daughter, Caroline, lived right here in Cascade Falls, but she would have called first, wouldn't she? "No," I said. "I have no idea." Margaret stood beside me now, her hand on my shoulder. After I hung up with the dispatcher, she insisted on calling her neighbor to drive me home immediately. The 2-hour journey stretched endlessly before me. Julia was texting updates. The police had arrived. They were entering the house, searching room by room. Then, they found someone. My heart stopped. "Who?" The 3 dots pulsed again. When her response came, I had to read it 3 times before the words made sense. "Scarlett, it's Caroline. My daughter, my own daughter, had broken into my house. No, she had a key. She hadn't broken in. But why was she there at night, standing in my living room like some apparition? Why hadn't she told me she was going to my house?" I called Caroline immediately. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I called again. Same result. A 3rd time. Finally, she answered. Her voice was strange, tight, defensive. "Mom, I can explain. Explain what? You terrified Julia. I called the police. What were you doing in my house? I needed to get something. At night? Without telling me? Caroline, you have a key. You could have told me you needed something. You would have said no. The words hung between us like smoke. In the background of Margaret's neighbor's car, I could hear my own breathing, sharp and quick. What are you talking about? What did you need that I would have refused? Silence. Caroline? I'll talk to you when you get back. She hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Margaret's neighbor, a kind man named Tom, glanced at me in the rearview mirror but said nothing. Margaret reached back and squeezed my hand. The drive home was a blur of darkened highways and scattered thoughts. What could Caroline have possibly needed? And why the secrecy? My daughter and I had always been close. Or so I'd thought. After her father died 5 years ago, she'd been my rock, helping me navigate the fog of grief and the overwhelming paperwork that accompanies death. But lately, things had shifted. She'd become more distant, her visits shorter and less frequent. She'd married her husband, Blake, 2 years ago, and while he was always polite, I'd sensed a coolness from him. He worked in real estate development, always chasing the next big deal, and I sometimes wondered if he looked down on my modest teacher's pension and simple lifestyle. We arrived in Cascade Falls just after 11. Julia's car was parked in my driveway, and she rushed out as soon as Tom pulled up. Scarlett, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. I saw movement through the window and You did exactly the right thing, I assured her, embracing her briefly. Thank you for being there. The police had left, but they'd given Julia a card with an incident number. Nothing had been taken, they'd told her. Caroline had been cooperative, explaining that she was my daughter and had every right to be there. They'd accepted her explanation and left. But I didn't accept it. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. Everything looked normal. The lamp glowing warmly, my reading glasses on the side table where I'd left them, the throw pillows arranged just so on the couch. Whiskers appeared from the hallway, meowing his complaint about the late dinner. Julia helped me feed him, then lingered nervously. Do you want me to stay? I don't feel right leaving you alone after all this. I'll be fine, I told her, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Go home, get some rest. After she left, I walked slowly through my house, trying to see it with fresh eyes. What had Caroline been looking for? I checked the obvious places. My jewelry box in the bedroom was untouched. My father's old lockbox in the closet, containing important documents, appeared undisturbed. The desk in my small home office looked exactly as I'd left it. But something felt wrong. It was nothing I could pinpoint, just a sense of displacement, as if the air itself had been stirred and hadn't quite settled. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table, my mind churning. Tomorrow I would talk to Caroline and get answers. Tomorrow this would all make sense. I was wrong on both counts. The next morning I called Caroline at 7:30, knowing she was an early riser. She didn't answer. I called again at 8, 9, 10, each time straight to voicemail. By noon, I'd left 3 messages, each one more pointed than the last. Finally, at 2 in the afternoon, she sent a text. Can't talk now. I'll come by tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening. More than 24 hours away. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was deeply wrong. I tried to distract myself with housework, but I kept returning to the same question. What had she been looking for? I moved through my house like a detective, examining each room with new scrutiny. In my bedroom, I paused. The closet door was slightly ajar. I always closed it completely. I opened it wider and studied the contents. My clothes hung in their usual arrangement. Shoes lined the floor, storage boxes stacked on the upper shelf. Wait. One of the boxes wasn't quite aligned with the others. It jutted out slightly, about an inch. I pulled over my step stool and carefully lifted it down. It was labeled Robert's Papers, in my late husband's neat handwriting. Inside were documents from his teaching career, old report cards, letters of recommendation, certificates. I'd looked through this box only once, shortly after his death, finding the paperwork too painful. But now I examined it more carefully. Everything seemed to be there. His teaching credentials, his retirement paperwork, his pension documents. Then I noticed something. At the very bottom, beneath a stack of old lesson plans, there was a gap. Not a missing document exactly, but a space where something had been. The papers above it had settled into a slight depression. Someone had removed something from this box. And I had a sinking feeling I knew who. My hands shook as I placed the box back on the shelf. What had been in there that I didn't remember? Or perhaps more troubling, what had been in there that Robert had never told me about? I descended the step stool and sat on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. My husband had been a history teacher, beloved by students and respected by colleagues. After his death, there had been a memorial service attended by hundreds. What secrets could a man like that have kept? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Reed, this is Detective Brennan with Cascade Falls PD. I'd like to speak with you about last night's incident. Could you call me at your earliest convenience? My mouth went dry. Why would a detective be following up on what the responding officers had deemed a non-issue? I dialed the number with trembling fingers. Mrs. Reed, thank you for calling back so quickly. Detective Brennan's voice was professional but not unkind. I know the officers last night determined there was no crime committed, but I'd still like to ask you a few questions. Would you be available to come down to the station? The station? Is something wrong? A pause. I'd rather discuss it in person. Would 3 o'clock work for you? I agreed, though my mind was spinning. After hanging up, I sat in silence, processing everything. Caroline's strange behavior. The missing document. Now police involvement that went beyond a simple trespassing call. Something was very wrong in my carefully ordered life, and I had the terrible feeling that by tomorrow evening, when Caroline finally decided to talk to me, it might be too late to stop whatever was already in motion. The Cascade Falls Police Department occupied a modest brick building on Main Street, sandwiched between the library and the old post office. I'd driven past it countless times in my 35 years living here, never imagining I'd be entering as anything other than a law-abiding citizen renewing a permit or filing a routine report. Detective Sarah Brennan met me in the lobby. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and an economical handshake. She led me to a small interview room that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I appreciate you coming in, Mrs. Reed. She gestured to a chair and sat across from me, a manila folder resting on the table between us. I want to start by saying you're not in any trouble, but we've had some concerns raised and I need to get your perspective. Concerns? About what happened last night? In part. She opened the folder, revealing what looked like printed emails. Mrs. Reed, when was the last time you spoke with your son, Daniel? The question caught me completely off guard. Daniel? Maybe 3 weeks ago. He's busy with his job in Seattle. He calls when he can. What does he have to do with this? Detective Brennan slid one of the printed pages across the table. He contacted us this morning. He's worried about you. I stared at the email, my eyes struggling to focus on the words. It was indeed from Daniel's email address, time-stamped at 6:42 that morning. To whom it may concern, I'm writing regarding my mother, Scarlett Reed. I'm concerned about her mental state and her ability to live independently. Last night she called the police claiming there was an intruder in her house, but it was just my sister checking on things. My mother has been increasingly paranoid and confused lately. I think she may need professional evaluation. I'm listed as her emergency contact and would like to be kept informed of any incidents involving her. The words blurred. I read them again, certain I'd misunderstood. But no, they were right there in black and white. My son, claiming I was paranoid and confused, suggesting I needed professional evaluation. Mrs. Reed, are you all right? I looked up at Detective Brennan. This is absurd. I'm not confused. Someone was in my house without my knowledge, standing there in the dark. My friend Julia saw them. She took a photograph. I've seen the photograph, and I've also spoken with your daughter, who confirmed she was there. She said she'd told you she might stop by and you'd forgotten. That's a lie! The words came out sharper than I'd intended. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I never forget things like that. Caroline did not tell me she was coming. She scared my friend half to death. Detective Brennan's expression was carefully neutral. Your daughter seemed quite concerned about you as well. She mentioned you've been under a lot of stress since your husband's death. 5 years ago, I said firmly. I grieved as anyone would. But I'm not falling apart, Detective. Something else is going on here. Such as? I hesitated. How could I explain the missing document, the feeling that something in my house had been disturbed, when I couldn't even articulate what was missing? I think Caroline took something from my house, something that belonged to my late husband. Did she take it without permission? Yes. But she has a key? Yes, but... So, legally, Mrs. Reed, even if she did remove something, it's complicated. She's your daughter. She has access to your home with your consent. You gave her a key. Unless you can prove she took something of significant value with intent to permanently deprive you of it, there's no theft. I felt the walls closing in. What about breaking and entering? She didn't break anything. She entered with a key you provided. Detective Brennan leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Reed, I'm not trying to upset you. I'm trying to understand the situation. Your children are concerned about you. Is it possible you're under more stress than you realize? No. My voice was steady now, cold. Detective, I taught high school English for 33 years. I managed a classroom of 30 teenagers, graded papers, handled parent conferences, and served on the school board. I think I can manage my own life. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of respect, perhaps. I believe you can, but I need you to understand how this looks from the outside. Your son claims you're confused. Your daughter says you gave her permission to be there, and you're saying they're both lying. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. The words hung in the air. Detective Brennan studied me for a long moment, then closed the folder. All right. Let me ask you this. Why would they lie? That was the question, wasn't it? I thought about Caroline's marriage to Blake, about how money always seemed tight despite his real estate job. I thought about Daniel in Seattle, about how he'd been distant since his father's death, calling less and less frequently. I don't know, I admitted, but I'm going to find out. After leaving the police station, I sat in my car for several minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My children were trying to paint me as incompetent, as mentally unstable. Why? I pulled out my phone and called Daniel. Unlike Caroline, he answered on the second ring. Mom, how are you? The casual tone infuriated me. How am I? Daniel, you sent an email to the police claiming I'm paranoid and confused. A pause. Mom, I'm worried about you. Last night you called the police on Caroline. She was just checking the house. She was standing in my living room at night without telling me she'd be there. She refused to explain what she was doing. And now you're trying to make me look incompetent. Nobody's trying to make you look like anything. His voice remained maddeningly calm. But you have to admit, your behavior lately has been concerning. What behavior? Calling the police over nothing, getting worked up about... It wasn't nothing. And I'm not worked up. I'm justifiably angry that my own children are lying about me. We're not lying, Mom. We're trying to help you. Caroline and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to discuss some options. My blood ran cold. What options? Maybe you shouldn't be living alone anymore. That house is too big for you anyway. We could help you find a nice assisted living facility, something with social activities, medical staff on hand. I'm 63 years old, Daniel. I'm not infirm. I don't need medical staff. Not now, maybe. But wouldn't it be nice to have that safety net? And think about the money you'd save, not maintaining that big house. We could sell it. Invest the proceeds for your future care. We could sell it. I repeated the words slowly. You mean you and Caroline? It would be for your benefit, Mom. All of it. I ended the call without another word. My hands were shaking again. Assisted living. Selling my house. The picture was becoming clearer now, and I didn't like what I was seeing. My children wanted me declared incompetent so they could control my assets, namely, my house. The house Robert and I had bought 34 years ago, where we'd raised our family, where every corner held a memory. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was in a desirable neighborhood, close to the downtown area that had been revitalized in recent years. Property values had climbed steadily. My modest three-bedroom home was probably worth close to $400,000 now. That was what this was about. Money. But it still didn't explain what Caroline had taken from Robert's papers, or why she'd needed to sneak in to get it. I drove home in a daze, my mind churning through possibilities. Once inside, I went straight back to my bedroom closet and pulled down the box again. I spread every document across my bed, examining each one carefully. Robert's teaching license, his union membership cards, old tax returns, letters of commendation, his retirement paperwork from the school district, his pension enrollment forms. I froze. The pension forms. I'd signed them with him. I remembered that day clearly. We'd sat at the kitchen table and he'd explained the options. Single life versus joint and survivor annuity. He'd wanted to take the higher single life payout, but I'd insisted on the joint survivor option. "I'm not leaving you with nothing if something happens to me," he'd said, smiling. But the forms here only showed the initial enrollment paperwork, not the final election. Where was the actual pension agreement? The document that spelled out which option he'd chosen? I searched through the box again, more frantically now. It wasn't there. My heart pounding, I went to my home office and logged into the pension system website. Robert's pension had converted to a survivor benefit after his death, paying me $900 a month. Not a fortune, but combined with my own modest pension and Social Security, it was enough to live comfortably. I navigated to the documents section and clicked on the pension agreement. The file loaded slowly. When it finally appeared on screen, I stared at it in disbelief. According to this document, Robert had elected the single life option. There should be no survivor benefit. Upon his death, the pension should have stopped entirely. But I'd been receiving payments for 5 years, $900 every month for 60 months, over $50,000. Money I wasn't entitled to, money the pension fund would want back, money that could lead to fraud charges if they thought I'd known about the discrepancy. My phone buzzed. A text from Caroline. "We need to talk. Tonight. I'm coming over at 7 whether you like it or not." I looked at the clock. 4:30. I had 2.5 hours to figure out what to do. I printed the pension document, my mind racing. Had there been an administrative error? But surely someone would have caught it by now. Unless someone had falsified the documents after Robert's death. Someone with access to his papers. Someone who knew that I'd be too grief-stricken initially to examine everything closely. Someone who could have changed the forms and counted on my receiving payments before anyone noticed. But who would do that? And why would Caroline want to remove evidence of it now? Another text, this one from an unknown number. "Mrs. Reed, this is Blake Granger. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to come with Caroline tonight to talk things through. We all want what's best for you. Blake, Caroline's husband, the real estate developer who always seemed to be chasing the next deal. I thought about his profession, about the knowledge of documents and paperwork that would require, about the financial pressure Caroline had hinted at over the past year. A new possibility formed in my mind, one that made my stomach turn. What if Caroline and Blake had falsified the pension documents 5 years ago, changing Robert's election to ensure I'd receive the survivor benefit? It would have been a kindness at the time, or so they could have rationalized it. Their mother, newly widowed, needing financial support. But now, 5 years later, with the fraud potentially coming to light, it had become a liability. If the pension fund discovered the discrepancy, there would be an investigation. Questions about who had access to the documents. The potential for criminal charges. And if I were deemed mentally incompetent, unable to understand or explain what had happened, who would be believed? The confused elderly widow who couldn't even remember giving her daughter permission to visit her house, or the devoted children trying to protect their mother from her own mistakes. A knock at the door made me jump. I glanced at the clock. Only 5:30. Caroline wasn't supposed to come until 7. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. A man in a suit stood on my porch holding a briefcase. He looked official. Too official. I didn't recognize him. He knocked again, then called out, "Mrs. Reed, My name is Philip Torres. I'm an attorney. I represent the State Teachers Pension Fund. We need to discuss some irregularities in your pension payments. The walls were closing in faster than I'd anticipated. In less than 24 hours, I'd gone from a peaceful visit with my sister to being investigated by the police, painted as mentally incompetent by my own children, and now facing potential fraud charges. I stepped back from the door, my mind racing. If I didn't answer, he'd come back. If I did answer, anything I said could be used against me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Caroline. Mom, Blake just told me a pension investigator is trying to reach you. Do not talk to him without a lawyer. I'm coming over now. I stared at the message. Caroline sounded genuinely panicked. Was she worried about me or about herself? The attorney knocked a third time, more insistently now. Mrs. Reed, I can hear you in there. I'm leaving my card. You have 48 hours to contact my office before we proceed with formal action. I heard paper sliding under my door, then footsteps retreating down the porch stairs. I waited until I heard his car pull away before picking up the business card. Philip Torres, Senior Investigator, State Teachers Pension Fund, a phone number, an email address, and stamped across the top in red ink. Urgent. Potential fraud investigation. My doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, I saw Caroline, her face flushed and worried. I opened the door. We need to talk, I said. Yes. She pushed past me into the house. Mom, this is serious. We have a big problem. Caroline paced my living room like a caged animal, her hands twisting together. I remained standing near the doorway, keeping distance between us. The daughter I thought I knew seemed like a stranger now. Caroline, what did you take from my closet? She stopped pacing, her back to me. The pension documents. At least she wasn't denying it. Why? To protect you. She turned to face me, and I was shocked to see tears in her eyes. Mom, this whole thing is about to blow up. The pension fund has been auditing accounts, and they flagged yours. When they find those original documents, the ones showing your father chose the single life option? Her face went pale. You know. I figured it out. What I don't understand is why. Why would your father elect an option that left me with nothing? Caroline sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. He didn't. I waited, my heart hammering. Dad filled out the forms for joint survivor. I saw them. We both did. Blake and I, when we were helping you sort through papers after the funeral. But Blake noticed something. She looked up at me, her eyes red. The forms weren't filed yet. Dad died 2 days before the enrollment deadline. They were sitting on his desk, ready to mail. Understanding crept over me like cold water. Blake changed them. He said it was the right thing to do. He said the pension fund would never know the difference, that you deserved the money after everything you and Dad had sacrificed for us. He made it sound so reasonable. Her voice broke. I believed him, Mom. I really thought we were helping you. So you committed fraud. Blake did. I didn't stop him. She stood abruptly. But now they're investigating, and if they find those original forms, if they figure out what happened, it won't just be Blake who goes to jail. I signed some of the paperwork, too, as a witness. They'll say I was part of it. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture more disturbing than I'd imagined. And you thought if I appeared mentally incompetent, if I couldn't testify clearly about what happened— No! Caroline's voice was sharp. That wasn't my idea. That was all Blake and Daniel. Daniel knows. Blake told him everything last month, said we needed Daniel's help to protect the family. Daniel suggested the incompetency angle, said if you were deemed unable to manage your own affairs, any investigation would get bogged down in legal complications. Questions about whether you even understood what you were signing 5 years ago. She laughed bitterly. Your own son, selling you out to save his sister. I felt like I'd been punched. And the email to the police this morning? Daniel sent it after Blake called him about the pension investigator. They're trying to establish a pattern, that you're confused, unreliable. Caroline moved toward me, her hands outstretched. Mom, I never wanted this. I told Blake we should just come clean, tell them it was a mistake, pay back the money. But he said we'd all go to prison. He said the only way to protect everyone was to make it look like you were the one who made the error, that you didn't understand what you were filing. So I'd take the fall. No, you wouldn't face charges if you were incompetent. That's the whole point. You'd be deemed unable to stand trial, and the investigation would fizzle out. We'd put you in a nice facility, sell the house to pay back the pension fund, and you and Blake would pocket the difference. I was amazed at how calm my voice sounded. The house is worth $400,000. The pension overpayment is $54,000. That leaves quite a bit left over. Caroline's face crumpled. It's not like that, isn't it? Before she could answer, the doorbell rang again. Through the window, I saw Blake's Mercedes in my driveway. Caroline saw it too and went rigid. Did you tell him you were coming early? No. Her voice was small, frightened. He's not supposed to be here until 7 with Daniel. I opened the door. Blake stood there in an expensive suit, his smile not reaching his eyes. Behind him was Daniel, looking uncomfortable. Scarlett, Blake said warmly, as if this were a social call. Sorry to arrive unannounced. Daniel and I thought we should all talk as a family. How convenient. I stepped aside to let them in, watching Caroline's face drain of color as Blake's eyes found her. Caroline, honey, what are you doing here? His tone was light, but there was steel underneath. I thought we agreed to come together. I wanted to talk to Mom first. Without me? He laughed, but it sounded wrong. We're supposed to be a team, remember? The dynamics in my living room shifted palpably. Daniel moved to stand near the window, his arms crossed. Blake positioned himself between Caroline and me. I understood the geometry of it. I was being surrounded, contained. All right, I said quietly. Let's all talk. Why don't you explain to me how defrauding the pension fund and declaring me incompetent qualifies as family loyalty? Blake's mask slipped for just a moment, surprise flickering across his features. He looked at Caroline. What did you tell her? The truth. The truth, Blake repeated softly. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Well, that's unfortunate. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Daniel finally spoke, his voice tight. Mom, you have to understand the position we're in. Blake made a mistake 5 years ago, yes. But it was done out of love to help you. If this comes out now, Caroline goes down too. Your own daughter. Is that what you want? What I want, I said slowly, is for my children to stop lying to me. What I want is to understand how we got here. We got here because Dad died and left us scrambling, Daniel snapped, showing real emotion for the first time. He left you with nothing, Mom. Do you understand that? He was going to take the single life option because the payout was higher. He was going to leave you with 0 pension income. I stared at my son. That's not true. We discussed it. He chose joint survivor. That's what he told you. But Blake saw the original forms. Dad had changed his mind. No. The word came out firm, certain. Your father would never have done that. Blake cleared his throat. Scarlett, I know this is hard to accept, but Daniel's right. Robert had marked the single life option. I have no idea why. Maybe he thought your own pension would be enough. Maybe he wanted the higher monthly payment for his lifetime. But the form was clear. Something in his tone struck me as false. I studied his face, looking for the lie. You're saying you saw my husband's handwriting selecting single life? Yes. Show me. What? Show me the original form, the one Caroline took from my house. You said you saw Robert's handwriting. Show it to me now. Blake exchanged a glance with Daniel. The form is somewhere safe. How convenient, because I don't think any such form exists. The realization hit me like lightning. Robert never changed his mind. He filled out the joint survivor paperwork exactly as we'd discussed. But you saw an opportunity, didn't you, Blake? A newly widowed woman, grieving, not paying attention to details. You could change the election, claim it was Robert's original choice, and no one would question it. That's absurd, Blake said, but his voice had gone hard. Why would I do that? Because you needed money. Your real estate business was struggling. It still is, isn't it? And you thought, what's a little pension fraud? The fund has millions. They'd never notice. Except they did. Caroline was staring at her husband, her face a mask of horror. Blake? Did you lie about what the form said? Don't be ridiculous. Answer me. I'm not going to stand here and be accused of... Because if you lied, Caroline's voice was rising. If Dad really had elected joint survivor and you changed it just to... What? To make Mom dependent on payments she thought she deserved? What was the plan, Blake? Skim money somehow? Use her gratitude to... She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. The house. You wanted her in assisted living so we could sell the house. You wanted access to that money. We need that money, Blake said flatly, the mask dropping completely. You think your boutique makes anything? You think we can afford that mortgage on my income alone? I made a business investment that didn't pan out, and we're leveraged to the breaking point. Your mother's sitting on $400,000 in equity, living alone in a house too big for her. It makes sense for everyone. It makes sense for you, I corrected. And when the pension investigation threatened to expose the fraud, you decided to throw me under the bus, make me look incompetent, unreliable, let me take the blame. Daniel stepped forward. Mom, it doesn't have to be like this. Just cooperate. Let us help you transition to a facility. We'll handle the pension situation. No one has to know you were involved. Involved? I laughed, a harsh sound. I wasn't involved in anything except being too trusting of my own family. Blake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw fear flash across his face. We need to go. Now. What is it? Caroline asked. The investigator. He's filed a formal complaint. They're freezing Scarlett's pension payments and launching a full investigation. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw desperation. If you cooperate, if you come with us now to meet with a lawyer I know, we can get ahead of this. We can control the narrative. The narrative, I repeated. You mean the one where I'm a confused old woman who didn't know what she was doing? It's your best option. No. I walked to the door and opened it. Get out of my house. All of you. Nobody moved. I said get out. Blake's jaw clenched. You're making a serious mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you. I looked at Caroline, saw tears streaming down her face, and not realizing sooner that my own daughter had been manipulated into betraying me. Mom, out, now. Daniel moved first, stalking past me without a word. Blake followed, pausing in the doorway. This isn't over, Scarlett. The investigation will move forward whether you like it or not. And when they start asking questions, when they start looking at who had access to Robert's papers, at who benefited from the fraud, your name is going to be at the top of the list. Let them look. I have nothing to hide. After they left, Caroline remained, standing in the middle of my living room like a ghost. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Mom. Sorry isn't enough. I know. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Blake's lying. About the forms. I saw them the day after Dad's funeral. They had joint survivor marked. Blake must have switched them later, after I'd already seen them. He counted on me not remembering the details in all the chaos. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I only just realized it myself. When you asked him to show you Dad's handwriting, he couldn't, because it doesn't say what he claimed. She wiped her eyes. I'll testify to that. Whatever happens, I'll tell the truth about what I saw. After she left, I locked the door and leaned against it, my legs shaking. The house felt hollow, contaminated by betrayal. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Reed, this is Philip Torres. I received some disturbing information this evening that requires immediate discussion. I'll be at your door at 8 a.m. tomorrow. This is not optional. Another message, this one from Julia. Scarlett, I just saw police cars at Blake and Caroline's house. Is everything okay? Police? My heart raced. What had Blake done? A third text from Detective Brennan. Mrs. Reed, we need to talk urgently. I have new information about your son's email this morning. Can you come to the station first thing tomorrow? I stood there in my dark living room, holding my phone, feeling the walls close in from every direction. The pension investigation, the police, my family's betrayal, all of it converging at once. I walked to my home office and pulled out every document I could find related to Robert's pension, to our finances, to the house. If I was going to fight this, I needed to be prepared. But as I spread the papers across my desk, I found something that made my blood run cold. A letter, tucked into an old file folder, dated 6 months before Robert's death. It was from our family attorney, Arthur Pemberton, addressed to Robert. Dear Robert, as discussed, I've prepared the documents per your instructions. The trust structure will ensure Scarlett is protected regardless of what happens with your pension election. The house will be preserved for her lifetime, and the children will only inherit after her death. Please come by the office at your earliest convenience to execute the final paperwork. A trust. Robert had set up a trust that I knew nothing about, which meant somewhere there were documents, legal documents, that could change everything. Documents that Blake and Daniel knew nothing about. Documents that might save me from the trap they'd set. I grabbed my phone and dialed Arthur Pemberton's after-hours number, praying he'd answer. He did, on the 3rd ring. Arthur, it's Scarlett Reed. I need to know, did my husband ever execute a trust agreement? A pause. Scarlett, I was wondering when you'd call about that. Yes, he did. The week before he died. The documents are in my vault. He never told you? No. He wanted it to be a surprise. A safety net. Another pause. Scarlett, why are you asking about this now? Because, I said slowly, I think someone's been trying to steal my house. And I think my husband knew something like this might happen. Come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Don't tell anyone you're coming. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness, my mind racing. Robert had known. Somehow he'd known that after his death, there might be pressure on me, attempts to manipulate me out of my home. He'd created a trust to prevent it. But what had he known? And who had he been trying to protect me from? A sound outside made me freeze. Footsteps on my porch. Slow, deliberate. I moved to the window and peered out. Blake stood in my driveway, staring at my house, just standing there in the darkness, watching. When his phone lit up his face, I saw an expression that chilled me to the bone. Not anger, not frustration, calculation. He was planning something, and I had less than 12 hours to figure out what. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow outside my window seemed to hold threat. Around 3 in the morning, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, organizing documents into neat piles, preparing for battle. The trust letter from Arthur Pemberton sat front and center. Whatever Robert had set up, it was my best defense against Blake's schemes. But I needed to understand what I was working with before facing the pension investigator and the police. At 7:30, headlights swept across my living room. I tensed, but it was just a neighbor heading to work. At 7:45, my phone rang. Julia. Scarlett, did you hear? Hear what? About Caroline. She and Blake had a huge fight last night. The police were called. I heard Blake's been arrested. My stomach dropped. Arrested for what? I don't know the details, but my neighbor's sister works at the police station. She said it has something to do with fraud and threatening a witness. Julia paused. Scarlett, what's going on? I'm not entirely sure yet, but Julia, if anyone asks you about me, about my mental state or whether I seem confused, you tell them the truth. Of course. You're the sharpest person I know. After hanging up, I sat back, processing this new information. Blake arrested. That was why Detective Brennan wanted to talk to me. But what had he done? Who was the witness he'd threatened? A horrible thought struck me. Caroline. Had he threatened Caroline after she'd promised to tell the truth? I called my daughter. No answer. I tried 3 more times. Nothing. At 8 o'clock sharp, Philip Torres knocked on my door. I let him in, noting the additional briefcase he carried and the grim set of his jaw. Mrs. Reed, thank you for making time. He settled into my living room chair without waiting for invitation. We have a serious situation here. The pension fund has discovered significant irregularities in your account, and I need to ask you some very direct questions. Before you do, I need to tell you something. I handed him Caroline's written statement, something I'd asked her to text me the night before, which she'd done before Blake arrived. It outlined everything she'd witnessed. Robert's original forms marked for joint survivor, Blake's access to the documents, his admission that he'd changed them. Torres read it slowly, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he looked up at me. "This is your daughter's statement?" "Yes. She's willing to testify." "Is she aware that doing so implicates her in the fraud?" "She admitted to witnessing the documents and not reporting the change." "She's aware. She wants to tell the truth." Torres leaned back, studying me. "Mrs. Reed, I'm going to be frank with you. This investigation was triggered by an anonymous tip we received 6 weeks ago. Someone sent us copies of documentation suggesting the pension election had been altered after your husband's death. The tipster claimed you were part of the fraud." "Who sent the tip?" "It was anonymous, but the documents included handwriting analysis comparing your signature on various forms. Someone went to significant effort to build a case against you specifically. Blake. It had to be Blake. He'd been planning this for weeks, setting me up to take the fall if the fraud was ever discovered." My hands clenched into fists. "I had nothing to do with changing those documents. I didn't even know there was a discrepancy until yesterday." "So you claim. But Mrs. Reed, you've been receiving fraudulent payments for 5 years. That's over $50,000. Whether you were aware of the fraud initially or not, you were benefiting from it. The fund will want that money back, and there may be criminal charges." "I understand. But if you read Caroline's statement, you'll see that my son-in-law, Blake Granger, is the one who altered the documents. He admitted as much to me yesterday." "In front of witnesses?" I hesitated. "My son Daniel was there, but he's been working with Blake. I don't think he'll corroborate my version of events." Torres made a note. "This is going to be complicated, Mrs. Reed. Very complicated. I need you to come to our office next week for a formal interview. In the meantime, your pension payments will remain frozen. You should also know that if we determine criminal charges are warranted, you'll need legal representation." After he left, I sat in the silence of my house, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. The pension fund wanted their money back. Blake had set me up to take the fall. Daniel wouldn't help me. And Caroline, even if she wanted to testify, was in some kind of danger herself. I looked at the clock. 8:45. I needed to be at Arthur Pemberton's office in 15 minutes. The law offices of Pemberton and Associates occupied the second floor of a historic building downtown. I'd been here once before, years ago, when Robert and I updated our wills. Arthur met me in the reception area himself, his white hair and kind eyes exactly as I remembered. "Scarlett, come in. I'm glad you called." He led me to his office and closed the door. "I was going to reach out to you soon anyway. There's been some activity regarding Robert's trust that concerns me." "What kind of activity?" He pulled a file from his cabinet. "About 2 months ago, I received a call from someone claiming to be your attorney. He said you wanted to dissolve the trust and asked for copies of all the documents. I told him I could only discuss the trust with you directly. He became quite insistent, even threatening." "What was his name?" "He wouldn't give one, but I recognized the phone number when he called back a second time. I had my assistant trace it." Arthur slid a piece of paper across his desk. "The calls came from Blake Granger's office." Of course they did. Blake had been trying to find out about the trust, to see if it would interfere with his plans to force me into assisted living and sell the house. "Arthur, tell me about this trust. What exactly did Robert set up?" He opened the file and began explaining. As he talked, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness wash over me. Robert had created an irrevocable trust with the house as its primary asset. I was the lifetime beneficiary, with the right to live in the house until my death. The trust was structured so that I couldn't be forced to sell it, couldn't be pressured into signing it over, couldn't lose it even if I were deemed mentally incompetent. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked quietly. Arthur's expression softened. He wanted to, but he wanted to time it right. "He called me the week he died. Said he'd tell you that weekend." He paused. "Scarlett, Robert came to me with very specific concerns. He was worried about Blake's influence over Caroline, worried about what might happen if something happened to him and you were vulnerable. He wanted to ensure you'd always have your home, no matter what. He knew Blake was dangerous. Not dangerous necessarily, but ambitious, unreliable. Robert saw how Blake pressured Caroline about money, how he was always chasing the next deal. Your husband was a very perceptive man." I thought about Robert. about all the quiet ways he'd protected me even after his death, the trust, the pension election he'd carefully chosen. He'd tried to build a fortress around me, and I'd been too grief-stricken to notice. Arthur, there's something else you need to know. I explained about the pension fraud, about Blake altering the documents, about the investigation. His face grew grave. This is worse than I thought. Scarlett, Blake has been trying to establish legal grounds to challenge your competency for months now. 3 weeks ago, he contacted a judge, Judge Granger, his uncle, about initiating guardianship proceedings. The room tilted. Guardianship? He claimed you were showing signs of dementia, that you needed someone to manage your affairs. He wanted himself and Daniel appointed as your guardians. Arthur held up a hand as I started to protest. The judge refused. He said there was no medical evidence to support the claim, and that it seemed premature. But Blake can file again, and if he can manufacture evidence, witnesses claiming you're confused, police reports suggesting erratic behavior, he's been building a case. The email to the police, having Caroline sneak into my house so I'd call 911 and seem paranoid. I felt sick. How long has he been planning this? Months at least, possibly longer. Arthur pulled out another document, which is why we need to act first. I'm going to file a motion to activate the trust protections immediately. We'll also file a restraining order preventing Blake from contacting you or coming near your property. And I strongly suggest you get a medical evaluation from a reputable physician, someone who can testify to your cognitive fitness. I'll do it today. Good. Because, Scarlett, I need you to understand something. Blake isn't just after your house. If he gets guardianship, he'll control everything. Your finances, your medical decisions, where you live. You'd essentially lose your autonomy. The weight of it settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't just about money anymore. Blake was trying to take my entire life. I left Arthur's office at 10:30 and drove directly to my doctor's clinic. Dr. Sarah Winters had been my physician for 15 years. When I explained what I needed, a comprehensive cognitive evaluation, she didn't hesitate. Scarlett, I'll do the eval, but I can tell you right now you're one of the most cognitively sharp patients I have. You remember medication dosages, dates of appointments, details from years ago? There's absolutely nothing wrong with your mental function. The evaluation took 2 hours. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, coordination checks. Doctor. Winters documented everything meticulously, then provided me with a letter on official letterhead stating that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment or dementia, and that I was fully capable of managing my own affairs. If anyone questions this, she said firmly, you have them call me directly. I'll be happy to testify on your behalf if needed. Armed with the letter, I headed home, feeling slightly more in control. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My front door was standing open. I'd locked it. I knew I'd locked it. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, staying in my car. Someone's broken into my house. I'm at 412 Maple Street. I'm not going inside. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me until a patrol car arrived 5 minutes later. 2 officers approached the house cautiously, then entered. I watched from my car, my heart pounding. One officer emerged and walked over to me. Ma'am, you can come inside. There's no one here now, but you're going to want to see this. I followed him into my house and stopped dead. Every drawer in my home office had been pulled out, contents dumped on the floor. Papers were scattered everywhere. The file cabinet was open, folders rifled through. Anything missing? The officer asked. I moved through the chaos, checking. The trust letter from Arthur. Gone. Dr. Winters' cognitive evaluation letter that I'd stupidly left on my desk while I went to the bathroom before leaving. Gone. Caroline's written statement about Blake's fraud. Gone. Yes, I said, my voice hollow. Everything I need to defend myself. The officer was taking notes. Any idea who might have done this? My son-in-law, Blake Granger. But I thought he was in custody? The officer checked his radio. Then his face changed. Ma'am, Blake Granger was released on bail this morning at 9:15. The same time I'd been meeting with Arthur. Blake had known I'd leave the house. He'd been watching, waiting. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Scarlett. Blake's voice was smooth, confident. I believe you're missing some important documents. You broke into my house. I have a key, remember? Caroline gave me one years ago, technically not breaking and entering. The police are here right now. They're going to arrest you. For what? Being in my mother-in-law's house with a key she knew I had? Scarlett, you're the one who looks unstable here. Calling the police twice in 2 days over family members accessing your house. He paused. Those documents you're missing? They never existed. You have no proof of anything. No trust letter, no medical evaluation, no statement from Caroline. And Caroline won't be making any more statements. She's realized where her loyalty needs to be. What did you do to her? I didn't do anything. I simply reminded her that if she testifies against me, she goes down too. She's been complicit in the pension fraud from the beginning. She signed documents. She received benefits. Her boutique was partially funded with money we diverted from your pension payments. Did you know that? I hadn't. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Caroline is my wife. She'll do what's necessary to protect our family. Which means she'll testify that you've been increasingly confused, that you imagined conversations that never happened, that you've been paranoid and erratic. His voice hardened. I have Judge Granger ready to hear an emergency guardianship petition. I have a psychiatrist who'll evaluate you and find exactly what we need him to find. I have witnesses who'll testify to your instability. You have nothing. I have the truth. The truth? He laughed. Scarlett, the truth is whatever the evidence shows. And all the evidence points to a confused elderly woman who's been making false accusations against her family. The officer was watching me, concerned. I turned away slightly, lowering my voice. Why are you doing this, Blake? What did I ever do to you? You're sitting on $400,000 while I'm drowning in debt. It's simple economics. The house gets sold. Caroline and I split the proceeds with Daniel. Everyone moves on. You'll be comfortable in a nice facility. You might even like it. No maintenance, meals provided, activities. It's really the best thing for everyone. And if I fight you, then you'll lose. I've been planning this for over a year, Scarlett. Every step, every contingency. You can't win. He paused. The guardianship hearing is set for Monday morning. I suggest you don't fight it. Make this easy on yourself. He hung up. I stood in my ransacked office, surrounded by police officers, holding a phone that contained the only proof of Blake's confession, a recorded call that might or might not be admissible in court. The officer approached. Ma'am, what was that about? I looked at him, at his young face full of concern, and made a decision. Officer, I need to file a formal complaint against Blake Granger. Multiple crimes, fraud, extortion, burglary, witness intimidation. And I need to speak with Detective Brennan immediately. She's actually on her way here now. We called her when we saw the break-in. Detective Brennan arrived 15 minutes later. I showed her everything. Explained about the pension fraud, the stolen documents, Blake's threatening phone call. She listened carefully, taking notes. Mrs. Reed, why didn't you tell me all this yesterday? Because yesterday I was still trying to understand it myself. And because my son sent you an email claiming I was mentally incompetent, and I didn't think you'd believe me. Did you record Blake's phone call just now? I checked my phone. I'd activated the recorder when I answered. An old habit from my teaching days when parents would call making accusations. Yes? May I hear it? I played the recording. As Blake's voice filled my kitchen, laying out his entire scheme, Detective Brennan's expression grew darker. When it finished, she looked at me. Mrs. Reed, I owe you an apology. You were right. Your family has been gaslighting you. She stood. I'm going to bring Blake in for questioning again. We'll also want statements from you about everything that's happened. This is now a criminal investigation. After she left with the other officers, I sank into a chair, exhausted. But there was no time to rest. The guardianship hearing was Monday, 3 days away. Blake had stolen my evidence, turned my daughter against me, and built a case designed to strip me of my autonomy. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. I still had Arthur Pemberton, who kept copies of everything in his vault. I still had Dr. Winters, who could testify about my cognitive fitness. I still had the recording of Blake's confession. And I still had Julia, who could testify about what she'd witnessed. Most importantly, I still had my mind, sharp, clear, and ready for battle. I pulled out my phone and began making calls. First to Arthur, to tell him about the break-in and the stolen documents. Then to Dr. Winters, to ask for another copy of the evaluation. Then to Julia, to ask if she'd be willing to testify about what she'd seen. Each person said yes without hesitation. By midnight, I had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Monday morning, Blake was going to walk into that courtroom expecting an easy victory. He was going to be very, very disappointed. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Arthur Pemberton worked tirelessly, gathering documents, depositions, and evidence. Dr. Winters provided not just a new copy of my cognitive evaluation, but volunteered to appear in court personally. Julia gave a statement to Detective Brennan describing everything she'd witnessed. And I spent Saturday and Sunday reviewing every detail, every document, preparing for the fight of my life. Sunday evening, Caroline called. I almost didn't answer. Mom, please, I need to talk to you. If Blake told you to call, Blake doesn't know I'm calling. I'm at my sister-in-law's house. I left him. I sat down slowly. What happened? I heard the recording. Detective Brennan played it for me when she questioned me Friday. Mom, I didn't know he'd stolen your documents. I didn't know about the guardianship petition. He told me you'd agreed to consider assisted living, that we were just exploring options. Her voice broke. I believed him. I always believe him. Caroline, no, let me finish. I've been so stupid. Blake's been manipulating me for years and I didn't see it. The boutique money, I thought it came from a business loan. I had no idea he was diverting your pension payments. When he told me we were helping you by changing Dad's pension election, I thought we were doing a good thing. I didn't realize he'd forged the documents, that Dad had never chosen single life. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my daughter's pain. What are you going to do? I'm testifying tomorrow. Everything I know, everything I've seen. Arthur already has my deposition, but I want to be there in person. She paused. Blake's attorney called me today. He said if I testify against Blake, I'll be charged as an accessory to fraud. He said I'll lose everything. He's probably right. I know, but Mom, I can't let Blake destroy you. I won't. She was crying now. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For not seeing what he was. For not protecting you. For believing his lies. Oh, sweetheart. My own eyes filled with tears. We'll get through this. Together. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, Robert's photograph on the mantel watching over me. I wish you were here, I whispered. But thank you for the trust. Thank you for knowing I'd need protection. Monday morning dawned gray and cold. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, pinned my hair back, and applied minimal makeup. I needed to look competent, composed, utterly in control. Arthur picked me up at 8:30. Ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing granite building I'd passed countless times, but never entered. We went through security, then up to the third floor where guardianship hearings were held. Blake was already there with his attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit. Daniel stood beside them, looking uncomfortable. When Blake saw me, he smiled, confident, almost amused. He thought he'd won already. Judge Patricia Granger, Blake's aunt, presided over the courtroom with an air of stern efficiency. She was in her 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. Arthur had warned me she was fair despite the family connection, but I was still wary. This is an emergency petition for guardianship, she began. Mr. Granger, you're petitioning for guardianship of your mother-in-law, Scarlett Reed, on grounds of mental incompetency. Mrs. Reed, you're represented by Arthur Pemberton and are contesting this petition. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, I said clearly. Very well. Mr. Granger's attorney, please present your case. Blake's attorney, Gerald Strauss, stood. He was smooth, practiced, and utterly convincing as he laid out their case. He painted a picture of a confused elderly woman calling the police on her own family, making wild accusations, showing signs of paranoia and instability. We have documentation from Mrs. Reed's son, Daniel Reed, describing concerning behavior. We have police reports showing she's called 911 twice in recent days over non-emergencies. We have witnesses prepared to testify about her increasingly erratic conduct. He called Daniel to the stand first. My son wouldn't meet my eyes as he was sworn in. Mr. Reed, can you describe your mother's recent behavior? Daniel cleared his throat. She's been increasingly paranoid. She called the police on my sister for being in her house, even though Caroline had permission. She's made accusations against my brother-in-law that are completely unfounded. She seems confused about conversations we've had. Has she shown any memory problems? Yes. She forgets things we've discussed. She misremembers events. Arthur stood. Objection, Your Honor. Can the witness provide specific examples with dates and details? Judge Granger nodded. Mr. Reed, please be specific. Daniel faltered. Well, there have been multiple instances. Name one, Arthur pressed, with a specific date. I can't remember the exact date. So, you're testifying about your mother's memory problems, but you can't remember specific instances yourself. Arthur's tone was mild, but the point landed. Daniel flushed. She's been generally more forgetful. Generally. I see. Arthur sat down. Strauss called his next witness, a psychiatrist named Dr. Raymond Fletcher. I recognized the name from my research over the weekend. He'd testified in dozens of guardianship cases, almost always on behalf of petitioners seeking to have elderly relatives declared incompetent. Dr. Fletcher, have you evaluated Mrs. Reed? I have not examined her personally, but I've reviewed documentation provided by the family. Based on the behavioral patterns described, paranoia, accusatory behavior, confusion about recent events, these are consistent with early-stage dementia or other cognitive impairment. Arthur was on his feet. Your Honor, Dr. Fletcher is offering a diagnosis without ever examining the subject. I move to strike his testimony as speculative and without foundation. Sustained, Judge Granger said. Dr. Fletcher, you may testify about general patterns, but you may not diagnose Mrs. Reed without a proper examination. Strauss looked annoyed but continued. He called two more witnesses, neighbors who testified that I'd seemed stressed and not myself recently. It was all vague, subjective testimony, but it was accumulating. Then he called Blake. My son-in-law took the stand with practiced confidence. He described how worried he'd been about me, how he'd only been trying to help by suggesting assisted living, how I'd become hostile and accusatory when presented with reasonable options. Mr. Granger, Strauss said smoothly, has Mrs. Reed made any specific accusations against you? Yes. She's accused me of fraud, of stealing documents, of breaking into her house. None of it is true. He looked directly at me, his expression sorrowful. I think she's projecting her own confusion onto me. I'm trying to help her, and she sees me as an enemy. And why do you believe guardianship is necessary? Because she's vulnerable. She's making poor decisions, alienating her family, and refusing help. She needs someone to protect her from herself. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him myself. Arthur stood for cross-examination. Mr. Granger, you mentioned Mrs. Reed accused you of fraud. Can you be more specific? She claimed I altered some pension documents. It's completely false. I see. Are you aware that the state teachers' pension fund is currently investigating fraudulent documents filed in Mrs. Reed's name? Blake's composure slipped for just a moment. I'm aware there's an investigation. Yes. And are you aware that you've been named as a person of interest in that investigation? Objection. Strauss was on his feet. Relevance? Your Honor, Arthur said calmly. The petitioner has claimed Mrs. Reed is making false accusations against him. I'm establishing that at least some of her accusations have merit. I'll allow it. Mr. Granger, answer the question. Blake's jaw tightened. I've been questioned, yes, but no charges have been filed. Yet, Arthur said. Now, Mr. Granger, did you call Mrs. Reed last Thursday and threaten her? No. You didn't tell her you'd been planning this guardianship petition for over a year? No. You didn't admit to breaking into her house and stealing documents? Absolutely not. Arthur turned to Judge Granger. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a recording of a phone conversation between Mr. Granger and Mrs. Reed from last Thursday. Strauss shot to his feet. Objection. We haven't been provided with any such recording. Because it was only obtained last Thursday after Mr. Granger broke into Mrs. Reed's house. Arthur handed copies to the judge and to Strauss. Mrs. Reed recorded the call on her cell phone. She's provided the original device to verify authenticity. Judge Granger listened to the recording in its entirety. The courtroom was silent except for Blake's voice, laying out his entire scheme, admitting to stealing documents, threatening Scarlett, explaining his year-long plan. When it finished, the judge's expression was stony. She looked at Blake. Mr. Granger, you just testified that you didn't threaten Mrs. Reed or admit to breaking into her house. This recording directly contradicts that testimony. Blake's face had gone white. That recording it's taken out of context. It seems quite clear to me. We'll address your perjury later. She turned to Arthur. Continue, Mr. Pemberton. Arthur called me to the stand. I walked up with steady steps, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything. The discovery of someone in my house, the missing documents from Robert's papers, the pension fraud, Blake's manipulation of Caroline, the stolen evidence. I spoke clearly, chronologically, providing specific dates and details. When Arthur asked about my mental state, I looked directly at Judge Granger. Your Honor, I taught high school English for 33 years. I managed budgets, supervised staff, handled crisis situations. Since retirement, I've managed my own finances, maintained my home, and lived independently without incident. I'm not confused. I'm not paranoid. I'm a woman whose family has tried to steal her home, and I refuse to let it happen. Arthur then called Dr. Winters, who testified about my cognitive evaluation. She brought charts, test results, and comparison data. Mrs. Reed's cognitive function is well above average for her age group. She shows no signs of dementia, confusion, or impairment. She's fully capable of managing her own affairs. Julia testified about what she'd witnessed: the figure in my window, my rational response, the police involvement. Scarlett is one of the most sensible people I know. She wasn't confused or paranoid. Someone was in her house. Detective Brennan testified about the break-in, the stolen documents, and the ongoing criminal investigation into Blake's activities. Then Caroline took the stand. Blake's face went rigid as his wife was sworn in. Caroline looked pale but determined. Mrs. Granger, Arthur began gently, please tell the court about the pension documents. Caroline's voice shook at first, then grew stronger. She described seeing Robert's original forms marked for joint survivor. She described Blake's admission that he'd changed them. She described the boutique money, the lies, the years of manipulation. I thought we were helping my mother, but we weren't. Blake was using her, using all of us to solve his financial problems. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have protected you. Strauss tried to discredit her on cross-examination, but Caroline held firm. Yes, she'd been complicit. Yes, she might face charges. But that didn't change the truth about Blake's actions. After her testimony, Arthur made his closing argument. Your Honor, this guardianship petition is not about protecting a vulnerable woman. It's about stealing her home. The evidence shows that Mrs. Reed is cognitively sound, that she's been the victim of fraud and manipulation, and that the petitioner has lied under oath in this courtroom. I ask that you dismiss this petition immediately. Judge Granger didn't even need to deliberate. The petition for guardianship is denied. Mrs. Reed, you will retain full control of your affairs and your property. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of perjury charges against Mr. Blake Granger. She looked at Blake coldly. And Mr. Granger, I'm issuing a restraining order. You are not to contact Mrs. Reed, approach her property, or interfere with her in any way. Bailiff, please take Mr. Granger into custody pending the perjury investigation. Blake's face went from white to red. You can't. This is ridiculous. I can, and I am. Remove him. As the bailiff led Blake away in handcuffs, he looked back at me with pure hatred, but I felt nothing except relief. Outside the courtroom, Caroline embraced me. Thank you for not giving up on me. You're my daughter. I'll never give up on you. Daniel approached hesitantly. Mom, I'm sorry. Blake convinced me you were actually confused. I should have checked myself, should have talked to you more. I should have trusted you. I studied my son's face and saw genuine remorse there. You made a terrible choice, Daniel. You betrayed me when I needed you most. I know, but you're still my son. And if you're truly sorry, you'll spend the next months and years proving it through your actions, not just your words. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Arthur clapped me on the shoulder. Well done, Scarlett. I knew Robert trained you well. I smiled despite myself. He tried to protect me even after he was gone. I just had to be smart enough to see it. As we walked out of the courthouse into the cool autumn air, I felt lighter than I had in days. The battle wasn't over. There would be criminal trials, pension repayments to negotiate, family relationships to rebuild. But I'd won the most important fight. I'd proven that age and wisdom could triumph over manipulation and greed. And I'd reclaimed my life. 3 months later, I sat in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, watching the first snow of December fall softly outside my window. Whiskers purred on my lap, and a fresh pot of coffee filled the room with its comforting aroma. The house was quiet, peaceful, mine in every sense of the word. The pension fund investigation had concluded 2 weeks ago. Philip Torres had been surprisingly understanding once all the evidence emerged. Blake's fraud was undeniable, and while the fund did require repayment of the improperly received benefits, Arthur negotiated a reasonable payment plan. I'd pay back $100 a month from my legitimate pension, a sum I could manage without hardship. Torres even admitted that their audit had uncovered 3 other similar cases, all pointing back to Blake's document tampering. You were a victim here, Mrs. Reed, he told me. We recognize that. Blake's criminal trial was scheduled for February. The district attorney had charged him with fraud, perjury, extortion, and burglary. His lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, but Blake refused to admit any wrongdoing. His arrogance would likely cost him. The prosecutor estimated he'd face 3 to 5 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Caroline had filed for divorce the day after the guardianship hearing. She'd also met with the district attorney and received immunity in exchange for her full cooperation. She'd lost the boutique. Turned out Blake had used it as collateral for loans she didn't even know about. But she'd found work as a manager at a local art gallery. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. She came for dinner every other Sunday, and we talked about everything except Blake. She was seeing a therapist, working through years of manipulation and control. Some wounds would take time to heal. I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored, she'd told me last week. The way he'd isolate me from friends, control our finances, convince me that his version of events was the only truth. I let him make me doubt my own memory, my own judgment. That's what manipulators do, I'd said gently. They're skilled at it. But you found your way out. That takes courage. Daniel had been by twice since the hearing, both times bearing apologies and expensive wine. I accepted the first bottle and poured it out after he left. The second visit, I was more direct. Daniel, you can't buy forgiveness with Cabernet. He'd set the bottle down, looking chastened. I know. I just don't know what else to do. Mom, I failed you. I chose the easy path, believed what I wanted to believe because it was convenient, because it meant I'd inherit half the value of this house someday. At least you're being honest now. Blake made it sound so reasonable. He said you'd be happier, safer, that we were doing you a favor. Daniel had run his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded me painfully of his father. But the truth is, I wanted to believe him. I wanted that money. My startup needs funding, and I thought, you thought your inheritance could solve your problems. Yes, he'd met my eyes then. I'm ashamed of that, of prioritizing money over you. I'd studied my son, this man in his 40s who still sometimes seemed like a confused boy. Daniel, Your father and I raised you to be better than this. We taught you about integrity, about family loyalty. Where did those lessons go? I don't know. Somewhere between student loans and startup costs and keeping up with everyone else's success. He'd shaken his head. That's not an excuse. It's just, I lost my way. Then find it again. Not for me. For yourself. He'd left shortly after, and I hadn't heard from him since. That was fine. Some distances needed time to close, if they ever would. Julia knocked on my door now, interrupting my reverie. She let herself in with the key I'd given her. A real key this time. Not a symbol of assumed trust, but of earned friendship. I brought scones, she announced, holding up a bakery bag. And gossip, if you're interested. I poured her coffee and we settled at the kitchen table. What's the gossip? Blake's attorney filed a motion to dismiss based on insufficient evidence. She rolled her eyes. Can you imagine? After everything? It won't work. They have the recording, Caroline's testimony, the physical evidence from the break-in. His lawyer is grasping at straws. Still, the man has audacity, I'll give him that. Julia bit into a scone. How are you doing, really? I know you say you're fine, but this has been a lot. I considered the question seriously. I'm better than fine, actually. I feel clearer, like I've been living in a fog for 5 years and it's finally lifted. The grief fog? Partly. But also the fog of assuming everyone meant well, of trusting too easily. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug. Robert used to say I was too trusting, that not everyone deserved the benefit of the doubt. I always thought that was cynical. Now I understand he was just being realistic. He protected you, though. The trust, the documents with Arthur. He tried. And I'm grateful. But Julia, the real protection came from me refusing to be a victim, from fighting back when it would have been easier to just give in. I met her eyes. That's what I'm most proud of. Not that I won, but that I fought. She squeezed my hand. Robert would be proud, too. After Julia left, I walked through my house room by room, taking inventory. Everything was exactly as it should be. The living room where I'd seen that figure in the window, now just a comfortable space filled with afternoon light. My bedroom closet, reorganized and peaceful. The office, cleaned up from the break-in, now containing a new file cabinet with a lock only I had the key to. This house held 34 years of memories. Robert and I bringing Caroline home from the hospital. Daniel taking his first steps in the hallway. Birthday parties, holiday dinners, quiet evenings reading together. Robert's last days in the bedroom we'd shared, me holding his hand as he slipped away. Blake had tried to take all of that from me. He'd tried to reduce it to a dollar amount, a commodity to be liquidated and divided. He'd failed to understand that this house wasn't about money. It was about a life lived, a family built, a history that couldn't be erased or sold. My phone buzzed. A text from Arthur. Final trust paperwork is ready for signature. Can you come by Monday? I typed back. I'll be there at 9. Arthur had been working on additional protections, ensuring that even if something happened to me, the house would pass to Caroline and Daniel only with strict conditions. No selling for 5 years. No using it as loan collateral. No transferring it to spouses. Robert's legacy would be protected, and my children would have time to prove they'd learned something from this disaster. Monday morning arrived cold and bright. I dressed carefully again. Not for court this time, but because it felt right to treat important business with proper respect. Arthur's office was warm, his secretary friendly as she brought me tea. Scarlett, come in. Arthur spread papers across his desk. This trust revision incorporates everything we discussed. The house remains protected during your lifetime, then passes to your children with the restrictions we outlined. I've also added a provision that if either child attempts to challenge the trust or contest your competency again, they forfeit their inheritance entirely. I read through the documents carefully, taking my time. Everything was exactly as we'd discussed. I signed each page, Arthur witnessed, and it was done. There's one more thing, Arthur said. He pulled out an envelope. This is from Robert's safety deposit box. I was instructed to give it to you after the trust was finalized. He was very specific about the timing. My hands trembled slightly as I took the envelope. It was addressed in Robert's handwriting. To Scarlett, my love, my strength. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter dated 1 week before his death. My dearest Scarlett, if you're reading this, it means you've had to use the trust I set up. I'm sorry for that. I hoped you'd never need it, that my concerns about Blake were unfounded. But I've learned to trust my instincts, and something about that man has always troubled me. You're probably wondering why I never told you about the trust, why I waited until the last possible moment to execute it. The truth is, I didn't want to alarm you unnecessarily. I didn't want to plant seeds of suspicion about our son-in-law if I was wrong, but I also couldn't leave you unprotected if I was right. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Scarlett. You don't always see it in yourself, but I do. You've weathered storms, raised children, built a career, and done it all with grace and wisdom. Whatever challenge brought you to this letter, I know you've handled it with intelligence and courage. The house is yours. Our life together is preserved in its walls, its rooms, its memories. Don't let anyone convince you to give it up unless that's truly what you want. Don't let anyone make you feel small or incapable or confused. You are none of those things. I wish I could be there to face whatever threat emerged. But since I can't, know that I prepared the best defense I could. And know that the greatest defense has always been you. Your sharp mind, your strong will, your refusal to be diminished. I love you. I've always loved you. And I will love you beyond death, beyond time, beyond whatever comes next. Stay strong, my Scarlett. Stay fierce. And never ever doubt yourself. Yours always, Robert. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Arthur quietly left the room, giving me privacy. When I finally collected myself, I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Robert had known. Not the specifics, perhaps, but the possibility. He'd seen what I'd missed. Blake's ambition, his willingness to manipulate, his potential for cruelty. And he'd built safeguards, not to control me or limit me, but to protect me from those who might try. But more than that, he'd believed in my strength. Even in death, he'd trusted that I would fight, that I would survive, that I would triumph. And I had. I walked out of Arthur's office into the December sunshine, the letter secure in my purse. The town looked festive, decorated for the holidays. People bustled past with shopping bags and purposeful strides. Life continued its normal rhythm, indifferent to the small dramas that consumed individual lives. That evening, Caroline came for dinner as planned. I cooked Robert's favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, homemade rolls, apple pie for dessert. Caroline helped me set the table, and for a moment, we were just a mother and daughter preparing a meal together. "Mom, I've been thinking," Caroline said as we ate, "about starting over. Not just with Blake, but with everything. I've spent so much of my adult life letting other people define me. Blake, societal expectations, fear of failure. I want to figure out who I actually am. That's a worthy goal. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I want to earn it. I want to be someone you can be proud of again." I set down my fork. "Caroline, I never stopped being proud of you. Disappointed, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But you're my daughter. You recognized your mistakes. You told the truth even when it cost you everything. And you're doing the hard work of rebuilding. That takes courage. I should have had that courage years ago. Maybe. But courage isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about finally choosing the right path, even when it's the harder one." After dinner, we sat in the living room with tea, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about the art gallery, about a new friend she'd made, about the small apartment she'd rented downtown. I told her about my plans for the spring garden, about Julia's book club, about the volunteer work I was considering at the library. It felt normal. Not quite healed, but healing. After Caroline left, I stood at my living room window, the same window where Julia had seen that figure 3 months ago. The figure that had been Caroline, manipulated by Blake into sneaking around her own mother's house. The moment that had started this entire cascade of revelation and confrontation. I thought about everything that had happened since then. The fear, the betrayal, the battle, the victory. I thought about Robert's letter, his faith in me, his preparation. I thought about my children, one trying to rebuild trust, and the other still finding his way. Most of all, I thought about myself, the woman I'd been 3 months ago, grieving, trusting, perhaps a little naive, and the woman I was now, stronger, warier, but not bitter. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to question what didn't feel right, to fight when necessary. Age had not weakened me. Experience had not diminished me. If anything, 63 years of living had given me tools I'd never fully appreciated: patience, perspective, the ability to see through manipulation, the wisdom to distinguish between true threats and false alarms. Blake had underestimated me because of my age, my gender, my supposed vulnerability. He'd seen a widowed woman living alone and assumed I'd be easy prey. He'd been catastrophically wrong. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Daniel. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about finding my way back. I'm starting therapy next week. I have a lot of work to do, and I don't expect you to forgive me quickly or easily, but I want you to know I'm trying. I love you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I love you too. Keep trying. The door is open when you're ready." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was possibility. And sometimes, possibility was enough. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed, Whiskers following at my heels. Tomorrow, Julia and I were planning to see a movie. Next week, I had lunch scheduled with Dr. Winters. In the spring, I'd plant roses in the garden Robert and I had designed together. Life stretched ahead, full of ordinary days and small pleasures, and the satisfaction of having fought for what mattered. My house stood solid around me, a fortress built of memory and love and hard-won wisdom. No one would take it from me. No one would diminish me. No one would make me doubt my own strength again. I'd learned the most important lesson of all, that growing older didn't mean growing weaker. It meant accumulating armor, sharpening instincts, learning to recognize danger and respond with intelligence rather than fear. Blake had tried to steal my home, my autonomy, my dignity. Instead, he'd inadvertently given me a gift: the certainty of my own capability, the knowledge of my own worth, the proof that I could face the worst betrayal and emerge not just intact, but stronger. I'd won not through force or luck or intervention, but through the patient, deliberate application of wisdom earned over 6 decades of living. That was a victory that would last the rest of my life. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought I felt Robert's presence, a warmth, a sense of approval, a whispered confirmation that I'd done exactly what he'd known I would do. I'd protected myself. I'd protected our home. I'd protected the legacy we'd built together. And I'd done it by being exactly who I'd always been: Scarlett Reed, retired teacher, mother, widow, and fighter. 63 years old and just hitting my stride. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.